My mother demanded I purchase a 5-bedroom mansion solely so my unemployed brother, Walker, and his family could live in luxury on my dime. I smiled, agreed to handle their housing, and secretly closed on a 1-bedroom historic cottage. When they saw the keys, they screamed. Before we continue today's story, we have an urgent announcement to make. Due to technical issues, we are pivoting towards another channel. Please subscribe to our new channel, Inherited Revenge. You can find the link in the video description, the pinned comment, and the collaboration tag on this video. Make sure to switch over now so you don't miss out. Thank you for your support. Now back to the story. The betrayal didn't happen in a boardroom or a dark alley. It happened in my childhood kitchen, over a plate of store-bought cookies that tasted like sawdust and deceit. I was already vulnerable. I had been battling a severe migraine for 3 days, the kind that starts at the base of the skull and wraps around the eyes like a vice made of hot iron. My vision was swimming, my stomach was churning, and I was physically exhausted from a 6-month sprint at work, coding until 3 in the morning, managing a remote team across 3 time zones, and securing a promotion that came with a significant pay raise that I had, stupidly, kept to myself. Or so I thought. I had come over to my mother's house because she said she had soup. There was no soup. There was just Linda, sitting at the head of the table with her hands clasped, and Walker, my older brother, leaning against the counter with that smug, lazy grin that had been getting him out of trouble since he was 5 years old. "Isabella, sit down," Linda said. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. I sank into the hard wooden chair, shielding my eyes from the harsh, fluorescent overhead light. "Mom, I really just need to lay down. You said you made chicken noodle." "We have a crisis, Bella," Walker interrupted, taking a bite of an apple he had pulled from the fruit bowl. He chewed with his mouth open, a wet, smacking sound that made my headache pulse. "Jessica and I are getting evicted. Again." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Walker, that's the 3rd time in 2 years. I told you, I can't lend you any more money for rent. I literally just paid off my student loans." "We don't need rent money," Linda said, her voice dropping to that silky, dangerous tone she used when she was about to ask for something impossible. "We need a solution, a permanent one." I looked between them, confused. "Okay. So Walker needs to get a job that pays more than minimum wage, or Jessica needs to stop buying designer purses on credit." Walker slammed the apple core into the trash can. "Don't start with that judgment crap. You don't know the pressure I'm under." "Here is the plan," Linda announced, sliding a piece of paper across the table. It was a Zillow printout. "I know you've been looking to buy a house. You've been saving for 5 years. I've seen your bank statements." My blood ran cold. You went through my mail." "I was tidying up," she waved a hand dismissively, as if violating my privacy was the same as dusting a shelf. "The point is, you have enough for a down payment on a substantial property. This one." I looked at the sheet. It was a sprawling, 5-bedroom colonial in the most expensive school district in the county. It was 3 times my budget. "Mom, this is insane," I whispered. "I'm looking for a small bungalow just for me." "Don't be selfish," Linda snapped. "Walker and Jessica and the kids need a place. You buy this house. You take the master suite in the attic, it's very private, and they take the main floors. You pay the mortgage, they cover utilities, when they can. You want me to buy a mansion I can't afford, to house a family of 5 that I didn't create?" I asked, my voice trembling not with fear, but with a sudden, boiling rage. "It's what family does," Walker said, winking at me. "Besides, you're single. What do you need space for? We're doing you a favor. You won't be lonely." The audacity was so heavy it felt like it was crushing my chest. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a wallet with legs. They saw my hard work, my late nights, my migraine-inducing stress as nothing more than a resource for Walker to harvest. "I'm not doing it," I said, standing up. "If you don't," Linda said, her eyes narrowing into slits, "then don't bother coming back for Christmas or Easter. And don't expect me to answer when you call. You help your brother, or you are no daughter of mine." I looked at Walker. He was smirking. He knew he had won. He knew Linda was my weak spot, that I craved her approval like a drug. But as I looked at his smug face, something inside me fractured. It wasn't a break, it was a shift. A realignment of tectonic plates deep within my soul. "Fine," I lied, my voice hollow. "I'll look at the house." The betrayal wasn't Jay. Us that they wanted my money. It was that they were willing to cannibalize my future to feed Walker's mediocrity. The drive back to my cramped apartment was a blur of tears and nausea. I had to pull over twice to dry heave on the side of the road, my body rejecting the stress they had just force-fed me. My phone buzzed incessantly in the passenger seat. Ding. "Walker, Jess wants to know if the house has a pool. If not, we need to budget for one." Ding. "Linda, make sure you get pre-approved by Friday. Walker's landlord is giving them 2 weeks." Ding. "Walker, also, I need the garage for my workshop. Don't park your car in there." I stared at the screen, the blue light illuminating the tears drying on my cheeks. His workshop. For the woodworking business, he had started and abandoned 3 times. For the car restoration hobby that resulted in a rusted chassis sitting on Mom's lawn for 6 years. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They were already moving in. In their minds, the deed was done. They were mentally arranging furniture in a house I hadn't even bought yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the floor of my tiny studio, the one where I ate dinner on my bed because there wasn't room for a table. I had saved every penny for 6 years. I drove a 10-year-old sedan. I cut my own hair. I did all of that to buy my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe. A place where silence was a feature, not a bug. And they wanted to take it. They wanted to fill it with Walker's screaming kids, Jessica's clutter, and Linda's judgment. I sat down at my computer, opening up the real estate listings. My finger hovered over the link for the 5-bedroom colonial Linda had demanded. It was beautiful, objectively, and it was a prison. Then I clicked on a saved tab. A listing I had been drooling over for months but hadn't dared to show anyone. The keeper's cottage. It was a historic gatehouse, built in 1920. Fully restored. Slate roof, copper gutters, original stone fireplace. It sat on 4 acres of protected conservation land, meaning no one could ever build near it. It was expensive, almost the same price as the big colonial because of the land and the historical significance. But here was the kicker. It was 800 square feet, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen the size of a closet but with marble counters, a living room meant for 1 armchair and a book. It was a jewel box, a fortress of solitude. I looked at the floor plan. Master bedroom, 12x12. Living room, 14x14. No basement, no attic access, no garage. A dark, cold resolve settled over me. It was the kind of calm that comes before a storm, or perhaps right in the eye of it. I picked up my phone and texted my real estate agent, Sarah. "I'm ready to make an offer, full ask, cash, but I have a specific condition about the closing date." I then texted Walker back. "I'm handling it, stop worrying, you'll have a roof over your head." It wasn't a lie, I would ensure they had a roof. I just never specified that the roof would be big enough to cover their ego. They had forgotten one crucial thing about me: I was a software engineer. I built systems based on logic, specific parameters, and malicious compliance. If they wanted me to buy a house for the family, I would buy the house that suited my definition of family, which, at this moment, was a population of 1. To understand why I did what came next, you have to understand the history of Walker. Walker was the golden child, the firstborn son, the carrier of the family name. In Linda's eyes, the sun rose and set in his average, hazel eyes. When we were kids, if Walker broke a vase, it was because the vase was placed precariously. If I broke a vase, I was clumsy and careless. When Walker got a C in math, the teacher was incompetent. When I got an A-, I wasn't applying myself. I had spent my entire 20s subsidizing his lifestyle. When he wanted to be a DJ, I bought him the turntables. He sold them 2 months later to buy concert tickets. When he wanted to start a landscaping empire, I bought him the truck. He crashed it while driving drunk, and Linda made me pay for the lawyer to keep him out of jail, claiming that a record would ruin his potential. His potential, that mythical beast that we had been hunting for 3 decades and never found. 2 days after the ultimatum, I went to meet the antagonists for brunch. I needed to keep up appearances while the paperwork for the cottage went through. We met at a high-end bistro that Jessica chose. Of course, she ordered the lobster Benedict and 3 mimosas. Jessica was a piece of work herself. She was the kind of woman who posted hustle culture quotes on Instagram but hadn't worked a paying job since 2018. She believed she was destined for a life of leisure, and Walker had convinced her that he was the vessel to deliver it. "So, Isabella," Jessica said, waving a fork dripping with hollandaise sauce. "I was looking at the listing your mom showed us. The kitchen is a bit dated. We're going to need to rip out those cabinets. I want white shaker style, and a farm sink." I asked, taking a sip of black coffee. "Well, I'm the one who's going to be cooking in it," she laughed, a shrill sound that grated on my nerves. "You're always on your computer. You probably order takeout every night." "Actually, I cook quite a bit," I said softly. "Whatever," Walker interrupted. "The important thing is the basement. I measured it out in my head. I can fit a 70-inch TV down there. It's gonna be the ultimate man cave. I need you to make sure the wiring is up to code for a surround sound system." "And the kids," Linda added, wiping a crumb from her lip. "The twins need the rooms facing the backyard. They need sunlight. You can take the room near the street, Isabella. The traffic noise won't bother you. You sleep with headphones anyway." I looked at them, really looked at them. They were dissecting my finances, my credit score, and my future, carving it up like a Thanksgiving turkey and leaving me the carcass. There was zero gratitude, zero acknowledgement that I was about to drop $500,000. To them, this was simply the natural order of things. Isabella gives, Walker takes, and Linda applauds the transaction. "I have a question," I said, keeping my voice steady. "If I buy this house, this massive house, how are you guys going to help with the bills? The electric alone will be $400 a month. The heating in winter." Walker scoffed, rolling his eyes at Linda. "Here she goes, the accountant." "We're family, Bella," Walker said, leaning in. "I'm on the verge of a big break. I have this interview next week for a sales manager position. Huge commission. Once that kicks in, I'll basically be paying the mortgage for you. You're making an investment in us." "A sales manager?" I asked. "Walker, you don't have sales experience." "I have people skills," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table, causing the silverware to jump. People at nearby tables turned to look. "God, you're so unsupportive. This is why you're single. You emasculate everyone around you." Linda reached out and patted Walker's hand. "Calm down, honey. She doesn't mean it. She's just anxious. She's not used to making big decisions like this." She turned her cold gaze to me. "Fix this, Isabella. Buy the house. Apologize to your brother." I looked at the lobster on Jessica's plate, which I would be paying for. I looked at Walker's red, angry face. I looked at Linda's expectant, demanding stare. "I'm sorry, Walker," I said. "You're right. I'm going to make sure you get exactly what you deserve." I signaled the waiter for the check. I paid the $150 bill without a word. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah, the realtor. "Offer accepted. The keeper's cottage is yours, closing in 10 days. I smiled for the first time in a week. They wanted a house. I got them a house. The 10 days leading up to closing were a masterclass in dissociation. I was living 2 lives simultaneously. In one life, the reality my family inhabited, I was the dutiful daughter finally falling in line. My phone buzzed incessantly with their demands, which had morphed from requests into detailed architectural orders. Jessica sent me 42 links to farmhouse chic furniture, totaling over $30,000 with the caption, "Just ideas for the formal living room. Put it on your card for points." Walker sent me rough sketches of a media wall. He planned to build in the basement of the imaginary mansion, demanding I hire a contractor to pre-wire the drywall before move-in day. Linda called me every morning at 7:00 a.m. to remind me that the guest suite, my room, needed to be far enough away from the kitchen so I wouldn't disturb Walker's sleep when I made coffee before work. In my actual life, however, I was methodically securing my fortress. I wasn't just buying a house, I was buying my freedom, and I knew that freedom would need to be defended. I hired a specialized locksmith to install deadbolts on the cottage's heavy oak door the morning of the closing. I contacted the local internet provider to set up a business-grade connection solely in my name, with a password so complex it would take a supercomputer to crack. But the most crucial step was the investigation. I knew that once I dropped the bomb, that the mansion didn't exist and the cottage was a single-occupancy sanctuary, they would try to guilt me into submission. They would use their destitute situation as a weapon. We have nowhere to go, we'll be on the streets. I needed leverage, I needed to know exactly why they were being evicted this time. Walker had claimed the landlord was selling the building. It sounded plausible, but Walker's lies always had a distinct, sweet smell to them, like rotting fruit. I took a half-day off work and drove to the county clerk's office. Public records are a beautiful thing. It took me 20 minutes to find the docket number associated with Walker's current address. It wasn't a no-fault eviction. It was a lawsuit for destruction of property and breach of lease. I sat on a wooden bench in the hallway, reading the complaint on my tablet. The landlord wasn't selling. He was kicking them out because Walker had attempted to renovate the rental by knocking down a load-bearing wall to create an open concept flow, causing structural damage to the unit above. There were also cited complaints of noise violations, and this was the kicker, unauthorized occupants. I kept reading. The judgment included photos, holes in the drywall, carpet stained with what looked like motor oil, a backyard filled with rusting car parts. Then, I made a phone call to a friend of mine in HR at the company where Walker claimed to have his big interview for the sales manager position. "Isabella," she whispered, clearly sneaking the call. "I checked the system. We don't have a Walker on the interview schedule. We don't even have a sales manager role open right now. We're on a hiring freeze." I thanked her and hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of validation. He wasn't unlucky. He was a liar. He was going to destroy the mansion just like he destroyed the rental, and he had no job prospects to pay for the damage. I printed everything. The court documents, the photos of the destroyed apartment, the email confirming the hiring freeze. I put them in a crisp, manila folder. On the morning of the closing, I signed the papers with a steady hand. The keys to the keeper's cottage were heavy, made of old iron. They felt cold and real. "Congratulations," the title agent said. "It's a unique property, very intimate." "It's perfect," I replied. I walked out to my car and sent a single text to the family group chat. "I have the keys. Meet me at the address I'm sending now. Bring the U-Haul. Let's get this over with." The drive to the conservation land was agonizingly slow. I led the convoy in my sedan. Behind me, Walker drove a massive, 26-foot U-Haul truck that he had undoubtedly paid for with Linda's credit card. Behind him was Linda's SUV, packed to the roof with Jessica and the 3 kids. They followed me off the main highway, expecting to turn into Oak Creek Estates, the subdivision where the mansion was. Instead, I signaled left onto Old Mill Road. My phone rang immediately. It was Walker. "Where are you going?" he demanded, his voice crackling over the Bluetooth. "The GPS says the estates are the other way." "Shortcut," I said calmly. "Trust me." We wound through the dense woods, the road narrowing from asphalt to crushed gravel. The trees formed a canopy overhead, blocking out the sun. It was beautiful to me, but I knew it must look confusing to them. There were no manicured lawns here, no community pools, just silence and nature. Finally, we reached the clearing. The keeper's cottage stood there in all its humble, historic glory. It was a stone structure, charming and solid, with ivy crawling up the chimney and a small, perfectly manicured garden out front. But it was small, undeniably, aggressively small. I parked and got out. I stood by the front gate, clutching my folder. The U-Haul groaned as Walker slammed on the brakes. Dust swirled around the truck. He hopped out, leaving the engine running. He looked around, spinning in a circle, scanning the trees. "Where is it?" he asked. "Is the driveway behind this little shack?" Linda and Jessica spilled out of the SUV. The kids immediately started running toward the flower beds. "Get away from there," I snapped, my voice sharper than they had ever heard it. The kids froze. "Isabella, honey," Linda said, adjusting her sunglasses. "I'm confused. Did we stop for a bathroom break? Where is the house?" I took a deep breath. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. "This is it, Mom. This is the house." There was a silence so profound it felt like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Jessica looked at the cottage, then at the U-Haul, then back at me. A nervous giggle escaped her throat. "Good one, Bella," Walker chuckled, though his eyes didn't smile. "Okay, very funny. You bought the guest house or something? Where's the main property?" "There is no main property," I said, leaning against the stone gatepost. "This is the keeper's cottage, 800 square feet, 1 bedroom, 1 bath. It sits on 4 acres of protected land. No new structures allowed." "I don't understand," Jessica whispered, her face draining of color. Where do we sleep?" "I sleep in the bedroom," I said, pointing to the single window on the second floor. "And you guys sleep. Well, you don't sleep here, because you don't live here." The explosion was instantaneous. "What?" Walker roared, his face turning a violent shade of purple. He marked D toward me, his hands balled into fists. "We have a 26-foot truck full of furniture. We gave up our apartment. We have nowhere to go." "You didn't give up your apartment," I corrected him, my voice cool and detached. "You were evicted for destroying it. I saw the lawsuit, Walker." That stopped him for a split second. He blinked, looking at Linda. "Isabella," Linda shrieked, rushing forward to grab my arm. I stepped back out of her reach. "Have you lost your mind? You promised. You said you were handling it." "I did handle it," I said. "You told me to buy a house. I bought a house. You told me to use my money. I used my money. You never asked if I was buying a house for you. You just assumed. You demanded. You threatened to cut me off if I didn't comply." "We are your family," Jessica screamed, tears finally spilling over. "We have children. You're going to leave your nieces and nephews homeless? You selfish, heartless bee." "Don't," I warned her. "Do not finish that sentence." "Open the door," Walker commanded. He walked past me and grabbed the handle of the cottage door. It was locked tight. He rattled it violently. "Give me the keys, Isabella. Now, we are moving in. We'll figure out the sleeping arrangements later. I'll sleep on the floor if I have to, but we are unloading this truck." "No," I said. "Give me the keys," he screamed, kicking the door. The solid oak didn't even budge, but a scuff mark appeared on the varnish. "That's destruction of property," I said, pulling my phone out. "Strike 1. The scene descended into chaos. Walker was pacing the small gravel driveway like a caged animal, kicking gravel at my new siding. Jessica was sitting on the running board of the U-Haul, sobbing loudly into her phone, presumably calling her mother to tell her what a monster I was. The kids were wailing because the Wi-Fi signals from their iPads didn't reach this far into the woods. Linda, however, went for the jugular. She composed herself, smoothed her blouse, and walked over to me with a look of pure, distilled disappointment. "I raised you better than this," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured grief. "To trick your own brother, to lure us out here with a moving truck, knowing there was no room, this is cruel, Isabella. It's sadistic." "Cruel?" I laughed, a harsh sound. "Cruel is telling your daughter that she's only worth love if she bankrolls her brother's failures. Cruel is demanding I take on a $500,000 mortgage for a house I don't want, just so Walker can have a man cave to play video games in while I work 16 hours a day." "He needs help," Linda shouted. "He's just had bad luck." Bad luck? I opened the manila folder. Is it bad luck that he knocked down a wall in a rental property he didn't own? Is it bad luck that he owes $4,000 in damages? I pulled out the photos of the destroyed apartment and held them up. Linda recoiled as if I had slapped her. I didn't know about that," she stammered. "Of course you didn't," I said, "because he lies to you, just like he lied about the job interview." I turned to Walker, who had stopped kicking the door and was now watching us with narrowed eyes. "There is no sales manager job, Walker," I said, projecting my voice so Jessica could hear me too. "I called the company. They're on a hiring freeze. There is no interview next week. You were planning to move into my house, let me pay the mortgage, and contribute absolutely nothing, just like you always do." Walker's face twisted. The mask of the victim slipped, revealing the predator underneath. "You think you're so smart," he sneered, walking toward me again. "You think because you know how to code and I work with my hands that you're better than me." "You don't work with your hands, Walker," I yelled back. "You don't work at all, that's the point." "It doesn't matter," he shouted. "We are here, the truck is here, we are moving in. We'll put the kids in the living room. Jessica and I will take the bedroom. You can sleep on the couch until we find something else. Unlock the door, or I will break a window." "If you break a window," I said, holding up my phone, "I will call the police. And since you're already in legal trouble for property damage, I don't think a vandalism charge is going to help your case." "You wouldn't call the cops on your brother," Linda said, her voice low. "Think about the neighbors. Think about the scandal." "Look around, Mom." I gestured to the empty woods. "There are no neighbors. That's why I bought it. There is no one here to judge me but you, and quite frankly, I don't care about your judgment anymore." Walker grabbed a crowbar from the back of the U-Haul. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. He was actually going to do it. "Walker, put it down," Jessica pleaded, standing up. "She's crazy, she'll do it." "I'm not leaving," Walker yelled, swinging the crowbar through the air. "I promised my kid. As a house with a pool, I promised my wife a fresh start. And this selfish, stuck-up brat ruined everything." He marched toward the beautiful, leaded glass window of the cottage. "I'm warning you," I screamed, my thumb hovering over the call button. He raised the crowbar. "I already called them," a voice boomed from the tree line. We all froze. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a man in a green uniform, a park ranger. "This is protected conservation land," the ranger said, walking toward us, his hand resting near his belt. I saw the U-Haul turn in. "Commercial vehicles over 3 tons aren't allowed on this access road. You're tearing up the gravel." Walker lowered the crowbar, panic flashing in his eyes. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding," Linda said, instantly switching into her helpless old lady persona. "My daughter, there's been a mix-up with the keys." "There is no mix-up," I said clearly. "I am the owner of this property. These people are trespassing. I've asked them to leave, and he just threatened to break my window." The ranger looked at Walker, then at the crowbar in his hand. He looked at me, standing alone with my folder of evidence. "Sir," the ranger said, his voice dropping an octave, "drop the weapon, now." Walker dropped the crowbar. It hit the gravel with a dull clang. "You are going to regret this," Walker hissed at me, his voice shaking with impotent rage. "You are dead to me." "Good," I whispered. "I've been trying to bury that relationship for years." The ranger stepped between us. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges?" I looked at my family. Linda looked horrified, not at Walker's violence, but at the fact that a stranger was witnessing it. Jessica was sobbing quietly, holding her children. Walker looked like he wanted to kill me. "Not yet," I said, staring Walker in the eye. "But I want them escorted off my property, and if they ever come back, I will prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law." The ranger nodded. "All right, folks, let's move, turn the truck around, carefully." As Walker climbed back into the cab, slamming the door so hard the truck shook, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was the first breath of fresh air I had taken in 32 years. The weeks following the showdown in the clearing were quieter than I had anticipated, but the silence was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I spent my days settling into the keeper's cottage. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of birds, not angry text messages. I drank my coffee on the small stone patio, watching the mist rise off the meadow. It was paradise. But I knew it wasn't over. Narcissists don't just disappear, they regroup. The climax came, predictably, at a public event where they thought I would be too embarrassed to cause a scene. It was my cousin Sarah's wedding. I had debated not going, but Sarah and I were close, and I refused to let my family dictate my social life. I arrived at the reception hall looking better than I had in years. My skin was clear, my posture relaxed. I wore a dress I had bought with the money I didn't spend on a 5-bedroom mortgage. As soon as I walked in, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Linda was holding court at a large round table near the dance floor, speaking in hushed, dramatic tones to my aunts. Walker and Jessica were there, looking disheveled and frantic. Jessica was wearing a dress that was clearly too expensive, and Walker was nursing a drink with a dark scowl. I took my seat at a table far away from them, next to some friends from college. I tried to ignore the glares burning into the back of my neck. Then came the speeches. After the best man finished a clumsy toast, Walker stood up. He wasn't on the schedule. He grabbed the microphone from the DJ, swaying slightly. "I just want to say a few words," he slurred into the mic. The room went quiet. To family, to loyalty, because some people in this room, they don't know the meaning of the word. My stomach tightened. He was going to do it. He was going to try and humiliate me in front of 200 people. "My sister," he pointed a shaking finger at me, the spotlight following him. "My own sister, Isabella. She let her nieces and nephews sleep in a Motel 6 for the last 3 weeks. She bought a house for herself, a selfish little hut in the woods, while we had nowhere to go. She promised to help us. She lied." Gasps rippled through the room. People turned to look at me, their expressions a mix of pity and judgment. Linda was sobbing into a napkin at her table, playing the grieving mother perfectly. "She has money," Walker continued, his voice rising. "She has so much money she doesn't know what to do with it, and she watched us struggle. She called the cops on me when I just wanted a place for my kids to sleep." I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply walked toward the head table, my heels clicking on the NCE floor. I reached into my purse and pulled out the manila folder I had been carrying everywhere since the closing. "Walker," I said, my voice calm but amplified by the silence of the room. "Give me the microphone." "No," he yelled, pulling it back. "Everyone needs to know what kind of person you are." "They will," I said. I turned to the DJ, who looked terrified. "Cut his mic." The DJ, sensing the shift in power, killed the feed. Walker shouted into a dead microphone, looking foolish. "Everyone can hear me fine," I said, projecting my voice to the back of the room. "Walker, you want to talk about loyalty? Let's talk about the $15,000 I gave you for your business last year. Where did that go?" That's irrelevant," he shouted. "Let's talk about the apartment you were evicted from," I continued, opening the folder and pulling out the photos. I held them up for the tables nearest me to see. "The one you destroyed. The one you owe $4,000 on. Did you tell everyone here that you knocked down a wall without permission?" Murmurs broke out. My aunt leaned in to look at the photo of the destroyed drywall. "And the job," I said, walking closer to him. "The big interview for the sales manager position, the one you used to justify me buying a mansion. I called the company, Walker. They've been on a hiring freeze for 6 months. There was no job. You were planning to move your family into my house and have me pay for everything indefinitely." Walker's face went white. He looked at Jessica. She was staring at him, her eyes wide with horror. You said the interview was confirmed," Jessica whispered. "He lied to you, Jess," I said gently. "Just like he lied to Mom. He's been lying to all of us for years to cover up the fact that he refuses to work." "She's lying," Walker screamed, lunging for the papers. She forged those, she's jealous of me. But it was too late, the room had turned. The pity was gone, replaced by disgust. Linda stood up, her face a mask of fury. Isabella, stop this, you are ruining your cousin's wedding. No, Mom, I said, turning to her. You ruined it when you raised a son to believe he was entitled to everything without earning anything. You ruined it when you tried to force me to bankroll his laziness. I am done. I am done paying for him. I am done apologizing for my success. And I am done being the villain in your twisted little narrative. I dropped the folder on the table in front of them. The evidence is all there. Read it, or don't, I don't care anymore. I turned to Sarah, the bride, who was watching with her mouth open. I am so sorry, Sarah. I'll send your gift to your house. I walked out of the reception hall. Behind me, I heard Jessica's voice rise in a shriek. You told me you had the job. You told me she agreed to the house. Where is the money, Walker? I didn't look back. The fallout was swift and total. Jessica left Walker 3 days after the wedding. She moved back in with her parents, taking the kids. When she finally saw the court documents and realized the extent of Walker's financial lies, she filed for divorce. She actually sent me a text a week later. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Thank you for telling the truth. Walker's world imploded. Without my financial safety net, and with his lies exposed to the extended family, he had nowhere to turn. Linda tried to take him in, but her retirement community had strict rules about long-term guests. He ended up renting a room in a shared house with 3 other guys, working a construction job that actually required manual labor. Linda stopped speaking to me. She sent me one long, rambling letter about how I had destroyed the family and humiliated her. I burned it in my stone fireplace, watching the paper curl and turn to ash. It was cathartic. As for me, I found peace. The keeper's cottage became exactly what I needed it to be, a sanctuary. I spent my weekends gardening, reading by the fire, and hiking in the woods. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. I started dating a man named David, a landscape architect who loved the cottage as much as I did and never once asked how much money I made. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn evening, I was sitting on my porch, a glass of wine in hand. The sun was setting over the trees, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Walker last name, viewed your profile. I smiled, took a sip of wine, and blocked him. The silence of the woods was profound. It wasn't lonely. It was full. Full of possibilities, full of peace, and most importantly, full of freedom. I had built a fortress, not to keep people out, but to protect the peace I had finally found within. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was home.